Good morning and welcome, voters. Thank you for your interest in the Florida Senate 25 candidates. District 25 encompasses North and Northwest Palm Beach County, including most of Jupiter proper and Jupiter Farms, out west to Lake Okeechobee, and Martin and St. Lucie counties. I am Mark Beaumont, president of the North County Democratic Club, and today I'd like to welcome Reinaldo Diaz, Democratic candidate for Florida Senate 25. Reinaldo, welcome, and please introduce yourself to the voters.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Reinaldo Diaz. I'm running for DeWitt 25. Many of you might already know me through my work in the community. I'm also the founder and a waterkeeper for Lake Worth Waterkeeper, an organization which is a member of Waterkeeper Alliance. A lot of my work, obviously, as the name implies, involves water quality and environment. And in particular, just like, there's all the northern estuaries in the greater Everglades, we all drink from Lake Okeechobee. And so many of our issues revolve around, our so-called drinking from that tap from Lake Okeechobee. And like Mark mentioned, much of the district covers Belglade North. And that's kind of like a hub. And one of the big reasons why I'm running is that area gets ignored quite a bit. But also it's connected to everything, right? It's connected to the Lake Worth Lagoon. It's connected to the St. Lucie and Indian River Lagoon. And as many of you already know, Lake Okeechobee currently has a very substantial cyanobacteria bloom. I think at our conservative measurement, 50 of it, getting its way down the river, and hopefully it's not going to be another lost summer, but this is clearly going to be a very important issue for this election, as it is for pretty much every other one that we've had, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running.
All right, Reinaldo, thank you. You speak of our South Florida water quality issues as unacceptable status quo. The incumbent you seek to unseat has a long career in Tallahassee and has helped cement that status quo. What is that status quo, and what are the decisions she has made to keep that status quo in place, and what needs to change?
Well, a really good example is the very recent signing of Senate Bill 712, the so-called Clean Waterways Act. So at the signing, the governor did it at the Loggerhead Marine Life Center in Juno Beach, which is pretty interesting to me. We'll get to why in a second, but right by his side was Senator Harrell as he signed this bill. She's very proud of this bill that she voted on, and it wasn't her product. It was, Mayfield's bill, another status quo legislator. And this bill has a really catchy name, Clean Waterways Act. How could anybody disagree with that? Except when you look at the bill, when you actually read the provisions, it's throwing feathers into the wind. It does the absolute bare minimum. It's really, I look at it as it was mostly a PR opportunity, which is a real shame because it started, like many things, it starts with promise, right? So the governor wanted to have the Blue-Green Algae Task Force put out these recommendations, and from there we were supposed to get some real good, solid work to be done on our water quality. So for months, more than a year now, me and my fellow waterkeepers, we've been working with the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, for example, to get them to put out better recommendations. And they did that. They didn't, it's the document, the recommendations that they put out wasn't bulletproof by any means, but there was a lot of things in there that went ignored by the legislature. Time and time again, we'll have local governments, like City of Stuart, tries to sue on these issues. We have state agencies. People in government know what needs to be done. But the problem is then we have to pass the baton to the legislature. And then what we always end up getting is just the cutting edge of mediocrity. They're the ones who always drop the ball on these issues. Senate 712 is such a good example of that. We had, decent recommendations from the Blue Green Algae Task Force. Even the governor himself said we need to listen to this Dr. Frazier and the team because they're going to put out these recommendations and they're going to help fix our water. And then the legislature, Senator Mayfield and everyone who voted for it, they gave us just nothing to really work with. We have a list that's been going around, at least 18, 20 different provisions that were recommended by the task force, just had absolutely nothing in policy in this bill. They just went completely ignored. And that's what needs to change. I figured instead of, beating my head against the wall and trying to get these bills better with legislature, then I'll just take one of those seats and I know what needs to be done, so I'll put the policy in myself.
Right. One of the things that the previous governor had done, I'm not sure if it's addressed in this bill or not, but the number of people who are actually monitoring the conditions is one thing. And is there any help of getting more people to monitor the situation and also I understand in the bill it's they talk about best management practices, but the way I understand it, it's voluntary, right? There's no
Right.
oversight that anybody can do. It's just, hey, this is what we recommend, but there's no way to
Right.
enforce it, basically, right?
So the way that is set up is an applicant, a farmer, they can apply for this program, and they basically have two choices. They can either choose to do this program with Department of Agriculture, where they, work together and come up with a better way to clean up their act, so to speak. That part is actually kind of good. I kind of like that aspect of it. We have a good framework of something. The other side of it is if not, they can also choose to subject themselves to DEP regular monitoring, in terms of how they apply fertilizer, for example. Of the, I forget what the number is, tens of thousands who have applied in Florida, nobody ever chooses that second option. So that in itself should be a red flag. Nowhere in law, if you're ever given a choice, will 100% of the people choose one side, unless it is, somehow skewed in their favor. And then the other side is if you ask the Department of Agriculture themselves, well, out of all these applicants, how many actions have you undertaken? They'll say, in the years that this program has been in operation, they've only taken one. So you mean to tell me out of those thousands of agriculture users and those applicants that you've only ever found one polluter? That sounds just incredibly lopsided and inefficient. So we do have framework there, I feel like, of something that can be improved, but it's never getting improved, not by 712, not by any other policy. In terms of monitoring, another thing that is exempt from monitoring are Class AA biosolids. Again, another thing that was ignored by the 712. AA biosolids are just as bad as A and B, the other two classifications of biosolids, and yet they're not required from regular monitoring after they're applied. So we don't really know how much of this stuff is being used in our watershed. We do know that it's ending up in Lake Okeechobee, for example, if it's being applied on the north side of the lake, and it's something that we need to keep an eye on. Similarly to water quality monitoring, I mentioned that the governor signed that bill on Juno Beach. Well, interestingly enough, Loggerhead Marine Life Center is down the road from the Lake Worth Lagoon. And one of the items that he vetoed in a budget was $500,000 to water quality monitoring in the Lake Worth Lagoon. This was critical for us because for example, in the Recover Act that is being made changed right now with the Corps will say they removed the Lake Worth Lagoon from consideration because they say, well, you know, Lake Worth Lagoon doesn't have enough science, a baseline to be considered, so we're just going to take it off the table right now. Well, it doesn't get the baseline because the governor and others do not put any money towards the Lake Worth Lagoon. And my feeling is because when it comes to Lake Okeechobee discharging, you know, there's only four ways for that water to go. After it comes down to the Kissimmee, it's going to either go to the Caloosahatchee or the St. Lucie or the Lower Everglades. What's not going to go into the Lower Everglades because it needs to be clean. So we're not going to be, you know, we're still working on that with the reservoir and other issues. Caloosahatchee has to get their share, obviously, to maintain their freshwater envelope. But then St. Lucie doesn't want discharges. So that leaves one other northern estuary. That's the Lake Worth Lagoon, and nobody ever likes to talk about it. And that's a problem. Nobody wants to study it because it feel like they know that they're going to need a punching bag, so to speak, of sending LACO discharges.
Okay, so a big part of this discussion centers on agriculture. I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about the pandemic and some of the agricultural workers. You've mentioned that state resources could have helped the migrant workers out in Belle Glade and other farming industries. What specifically can the state legislature and our state government do to help the migrant workers?
Well, earlier in the year when this pandemic started ramping up, migrant workers knew that this was going to be a concern. So they specifically reached out. You know, I think it was like the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, for example, reached out that they need resources. And what I mean by resources is they need testing, but they also need even things as simple as like the signs that we see, or the media outreach of, you know, wear a mask and do this and that. One thing that most people don't realize or they overlook is the fact that, especially here in Palm Beach County, we have a very substantial portion of the population who end up being migrant workers who do not speak English or Spanish. They're native, they're speaking Mayan languages. I came across this recently where the Palm Beach County's own demographics, the top 3 languages spoken according to the previous census, we're still getting the new data, and is English, Spanish, and then third was Portuguese, which I found to be very interesting because growing up here and just being here and working in a community, I certainly encounter a lot more Haitian Creole speaking people than Portuguese, and in particular here, like in Lake Worth and especially in the Glades communities and the migrant workers, it's the Mayan languages, it's Quechua and those languages. So none of the resources, I've seen resources in Creole, but I haven't seen any resources in Mayan languages. And what you see when you go through a place like Lake Worth, where you go, through the Glades communities where these communities live, is you're going to see substantially less people wearing a mask or, doing what is needed. And it's not because, they don't want to. I feel like it's because the resources haven't reached them. We're talking about a community who many of whom probably don't even have adequate internet access. So trying to rely on website, for example, is just not going to work in these groups. And then, of course, that means educating them on available testing sites and why that's important. Because without testing, without that data collection, we're shooting in the dark and we're making these decisions not based on sound science.
Okay, thanks for that. On a similar issue for the workers, a couple of items here to discuss. What would be an alternative to sugarcane field burning, a practice that has left a detrimental effect on the residents and workers there? And also another issue that you talk about is the the diminishing rights of the people to bring developers and polluters to justice. It seems like that those rights are being taken away. So can you comment on those two items?
Absolutely. So the pre-harvest sugarcane burning, there is an easy alternative in that, and we know that because other countries have already adopted it, and then Florida itself uses it in other areas. And that is, instead of burning the field before harvesting it, they can just harvest it while it's green. So farmers will tell you, well, we need to burn those fields because if you burn the outside leaves of the cane, and so when you harvest the cane and you put that on the truck, you're filling up the truck with more product versus product plus the leaves, which can't really be used. So, in other words, they're saving some fuel money. Well, obviously that comes with a great public health risk in burning the field. I mean, and a lot of times they're burning these fields right up to people's property lines. They're burning it around schools and stuff. And it's just not right, because we know that they can harvest it green, that this practice doesn't need to be done. They just are going to have to cut into their bottom line a little bit. And then I'm going to throw out another, legal concept, that's environmental racism. I look at it as, this is environmental racism because this practice is being done in communities like Belglade, Pahokee, and Canal Point, but it's not being done in Clewiston. It's not being done if we have a strong west wind where it's going to blow that smoke towards Wellington. These decisions are being made, and it's, even if when you ask people in the community there, they know why. They're not clueless. They know the reason why they're being the sacrificial lamb. So that's a hard pass on that bill, on that practice. It really needs to just be stopped. In terms of our rights being eroded to take polluters to court, that is something, one of the top issues I work on as a water keeper is the federal government's rollback on the Waters of the U.S. rule of the Clean Water Act. So that rule, WOTUS for short, that basically is the rule in the Clean Water Act that determines what bodies of water are going to be protected by the Clean Water Act. It's our standing. Our standing is everything in environmental law, because science and law generally is going to be on our side when it comes to polluting or development. So what the other side typically does is they're going to attack our standing first. Do we even have a right to bring a lawsuit? And we've been pretty good at adapting, and for a while we were really good at winning at that argument. So what we end up seeing now is this effort from the current administration, like the federal EPA's redefinition of WOTUS. The definition that they're proposing from our analysis, for example, the Lake Worth Lagoon, which is Lake Okeechobee, all the way to the beach, basically Palm Beach County, we're looking at something like at least 75% of the waters in between losing Clean Water Act protection. That's really significant, because if you ask any public interest environmental attorney, if we challenge a development, if we challenge a polluter, this is South Florida. The ground that we're standing on is, most of it's supposed to be underwater. So if you look at our complaints, 100% of the time you're going to see a Clean Water Act claim. So they're trying to take away our ability to make that claim. Similarly, the governor last session signed a bill that would put us on the hook automatically for the other side's attorney's fees if we were to lose a comp plan lawsuit. And those kinds of actions, they're really expensive. I've already had people reach out to me who wanted to challenge something, destroying a wetland in their own backyard. And then the thing that turns them off of it is that probability of us losing hard enough that we might be that they might have to pay for the other side's attorney's fees. They can't afford that. We're public interest, so we're working to benefit the community. But the other side, the developers, they're using, they're not using public interest attorneys. They're using $500-600 attorneys at least. So for a neighbor to lose a case and to have to pay for that in itself is reason for them to get turned off from even bringing the challenge in the first place. So signing that bill to make the fees automatic is just, it's killing off a lot of potential actions that are going to be brought. There's so many examples. I don't even know where to end, but there's so many examples like that where they're specifically designing these policy to discourage people from going to court.
Okay, Reinaldo, we're coming up on our 20-minute window. Do you have any last comments to make to the voters? We haven't really touched on anything like we spent a lot of time on environment, but healthcare, education.
Right.
You have any final comments
Yeah.
or words for the voters?
So, environment is definitely a focus, but it isn't everything for sure. And I'm certainly well versed to talk about all the other issues, whether it's police reform, healthcare, our economy, because when you look at it, when you take a step back and you look at all these problems, it's all the same problem. It's all the same framework. I always hate to say this, but when it comes to environment, the pollution is almost secondary. That problem we can usually take care of. The primary problem that we face are these special interests, are the big money groups who are buying their influence in the legislature. The legislator is giving us these mediocre bills, not because they don't know what they're doing or they're inadequate. They're giving us these mediocre bills like 712 because they're donors that have, give them tons of money for their campaign. They're the ones who are holding the thumb on the scale. They're the ones who are saying, hey, like, don't make our life too difficult. We still want to develop Florida. It's the same for healthcare, the insurance industry. It's the same for literally any other issue. For police, it's all these contractors that provide equipment and stuff like that. No matter what the industry is or what the problem is, there's going to be some big money special interest that has exercised their right to donate as a corporation to these legislators, and that's what's crippling us. So I run environment might be the focus, but really the priority or the reason behind my running is to remove that special interest and to bring that seat, that legislator, back to where it belongs, to our constituents, because technically we still like to believe that we live in a representative government, and
Absolutely.
we need to bring that back.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Reinaldo. Voters, thank you for watching. We've got a big, Reinaldo is running in a primary, so he needs you to consider voting for him August 18th, and there's early voting as well. If Reinaldo prevails, that would be great. We have a big election coming up in November, and we need all the voters to vote down ballot in these important state legislature races. And Reinaldo, good luck with your campaign, and all the best to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.